Tonight, I will be sharing 7 of your stories. Sure, I tell stories sent in from you guys all the time, but I figured it would be a nice change of pace to occasionally do videos based off the premise of it. From stories involving survivor's guilt, some strange monsters and rituals, and more. A huge thank you to all of tonight's writers. Remember to send in your story if you'd like to have it featured. You can either submit it at my subreddit, r/slumberreads. We are very close to 300 members over there, so if you're not following the subreddit yet, it's a place where you can send in your own stories, as well as read stories that others have sent in before they're even narrated on the channel. Of course, there's still the option of emailing it as well. Be sure to drop a like if you enjoy. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. The sounds are horrible. The sounds are like a train speeding down the railroads. After one night at a train station, those sounds will never leave my head. Writing this makes me go insane. Just thinking about the sound makes me go crazy. Sorry for the lack of introduction. My name is Mila. I just graduated high school not so long ago, and already have a part-time job at a McDonald's. I leave for college next month, but those sounds will follow me everywhere I go. Sorry, going off track again. I'm going to college in Umblewood, which is far from home, but no matter how far from home I am, the sounds will follow me wherever I go. I wish I saved the girl, Claire. She was cut in half by a train. When I saw the train ride over her and cut her in half, I fainted. She didn't live. I wish I called for someone to help her. She was the most innocent person in the world. She worked at McDonald's and she always helped me, but I didn't help her. Even though I never phoned for help, someone did. I woke up in a hospital bed. She never woke up. The guilt of my past was ruthless. I was at work, taking orders of the last batch of customers before I could go home. After her death of being run over by a train, it was hard to pay attention. Sometimes when someone is talking to me, I doze off. I would stop in the middle of my tracks, or just freeze up randomly. My therapist calls it survivor's guilt, which is when you feel like you did something wrong during a traumatic event, like me seeing the woman be split in half. This customer ordered his food and sat down at a table, waiting for his order. After he ordered, I dozed off, just staring in space, and the voice of the man snapped me out of it. "Hey, miss, come over here and take a seat." The man starts to reach for his wallet. When he pulled his wallet out, he pulled a photo out of it. "Do you see something strange in this photo?" the man asked. I flipped the photo and saw the train station I go to take a train home. The train station where my friend was cut in half. The photo was on the bridge that goes above the train tracks. It was night, and the photo looked pretty normal. "I see nothing, sir," I said, holding up the photo. He placed the photo back down on the table and pointed to something on it, and what I saw gave me chills. It was a woman with dirty hair, crawling towards the photographer, which I assumed was the man. In the woman's hand was a sickle, a bloody sickle. I look at the woman more, and I didn't see any legs. "Sir, where are her legs?" I asked with a puzzled look. The man looks at me, and what he said gave me more chills. The woman had no legs. It was like her legs were cut off, the man said. He picks up the photo and puts it back in his wallet, then puts the wallet in his pocket. "So, I saw the woman in the photo 6 days ago near the train station down the block. I take the station every day, and I see you all the time, so I thought I should tell you something," the man said. "What?" I asked. "If you see the woman in the photo I showed you, run, because your life depends on it," the man said with a dead serious voice. "Sir, what are you talking about?" The man immediately then said, "A friend of mine was killed by her, and I almost died 6 days ago. She hunts you down and cuts you in half with the sickle she holds." I start to chatter my teeth a little. "Sir?" He interrupted my words. "Call me Dale." Dale crossed his arms. "Dale, what are you talking about?" I ask in confusion. "Just listen. If you encounter her, run for your life. I almost died 6 days ago, and she is fast. I'm lucky I'm still alive. Being a gun carrier saved me. He then pulled out his gun to show me. I stutter with my words. I shouldn't have to explain anymore. Just follow my advice. He puts his hand on the table. Then our conversation was interrupted by an employee with the man's order. Oh, your order. I'll go get it. I'll be right back, I said. I stand up and walk towards the tray on the counter. I pick it up and walk back to the guy. I then place it on the table. Well, enjoy your meal, sir. I stand at the train station, waiting for my train to stop and let me on. But the entire wait, I was thinking about the conversation with Dale. Is he being serious? Is the photo even real? Why would he even tell me that? I started to have thoughts, which distracted me from knowing I was the only one on the train station. I look around the train station. Dale must have told everyone, I tell myself. I then see someone walk into the station, which made me relieved a little. But as I examined the person, who was a woman, she looked a little strange. Tattered up clothes, bruises on the skin that was uncovered, and she stared down at the ground. I stared at the woman a little more, and she looked like someone I knew. Excuse me, ma'am, do I know you? I asked, which made the woman look at me. She lifted her head slowly, then looks at me dead in the eye, and I figured out who she was. She was my friend, who was cut in half by a train. Mila. It started to call out my name. Claire? I call out in shock. All of a sudden her torso falls off of her legs onto the floor, like when she was cut in half. Her arms hold her torso up, as the legs fall on the floor like a wooden plank. I start to back up swiftly towards the bridge over the tracks. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm sorry, I yelled, almost sobbing. Then I started to recall Dale's instructions. I remember him saying, if I see it, run for my life. So I booked it, and it chased me. Her crawling sounded exactly like the train. I climb up the bridge, and she just crawled up. As I try to run, she tackles me down to the ground. Then that's when I cry as Claire crawls on top of me. Please stop, I beg, trying to punch her away from me. And my punch threw Claire off the bridge onto the tracks. I get up on my 2 feet and continue to run down the bridge. All I can hear is my running and heart pumping. Then Claire caught up to me, and I felt the sickle drive through my pelvis. My torso and legs fell to the surface. I then just lay there in silence. The silence is then filled by her crawling. Claire crawls away. As I lay there dying on the ground, I was found, not cut in half, but passed out on a table at my McDonald's. An employee called an ambulance for me after noticing my weird behavior. He noticed I was talking to the air. When the ambulance arrived, I was passed out on the table Dale was sitting at. When I looked at the surveillance footage of the night I passed out, there was a Dale, but Dale didn't even know me or understood what I was telling him. He didn't even tell me advice. My therapist told me that it was all caused by the guilt in my chest. Apparently, I had so much guilt my mind created my death. I'm in college now. Claire is still dead, and I'm happy I'm still alive to this day. Every time I walk to class, I still hear the haunting sound. I can never tell if it's real or my imagination. God, please let it be my imagination. The sound of crunching gravel quietened as the small bus slowed to a crawl at the foot of the campsite. The old metal doors opened with a wheeze, and the reluctant campers exited into the ancient wood. The last to exit the bus, Elliot, stepped onto the stone and dirt. Shortly after he did so, the bus rolled back down the woodland trail out of sight. "Howdy, campers," announced an all too enthusiastic man as he jogged up to the group. Elliot rolled his eyes. The man was wearing brown, baggy shorts and a bright blue t-shirt, a red whistle hanging from his neck. He also donned a gray baseball cap, the words "Camp Counselor" sewn into the front. Similarly dressed adults wandered through the campsite in the background, carrying mattresses to and from the 2 low wooden cabins on either side of a small fire pit. "I'm Matt, your head camp counselor, and this is Camp Disconnect." The man shouted to the crowd of unimpressed teens. Elliot scoffed at the ridiculousness of his tone. After an uncomfortable silence, the man continued. Now, the first rule of Camp Disconnect is that you gotta disconnect, he said with a grin, holding out a plastic tray. Come on, kids. Phones in the tray. The group moaned before complying. After everyone, including Elliot, threw their phones in the tray, Matt handed off to another counselor. Now before you are shown to your beds, let me go over the rules. Number 1, bedtime is 10. Gotta be in bed by then, okay? Number 2, no wandering off into the woods. We wouldn't want you to get lost, would we? Number 3, no communication with the outside world, hence the phone tray. Now lucky for you guys, however, we will allow relatives and friends to send you letters, which we will give to you as soon as they get to us. You will not be able to respond though. This is Camp Disconnect, remember. Now let's get you folks settled in. After a brief and unmemorable tour, Elliot and the rest of the campers were shown to their respective beds. It was clear just from this short introduction that Elliot was not going to have an enjoyable 4 weeks. Elliot woke up in the morning on his 5th day at Camp Disconnect. He sat up with a groan. The stiff springs on the mattress had been digging into his back all night. The past 4 days had been tough for him, and not just because he had no phone. The place stunk of rotted wood and excrement. It was infested with flies and other swarms of bugs. And the food. Oh God, the food. Gruel is what it was. Elliot had no clue what was in it, aside from the occasional hair. The ingredients were a mystery. He rubbed his eyes as flakes of dead skin fell from his face. Elliot Peters, called a man in the center of the rows of beds. Elliot looked up and squinted. He hadn't noticed him before. He was large, donning a familiar blue attire. However, he appeared to be a good deal older than the rest of the staff. Elliot Peters? He repeated, but louder this time. Yeah, over here. Elliot stuck his hand out. The large man marched over to him. A letter for you, he growled, handing Elliot a sealed white envelope. Thanks, Elliot murmured as the man wandered back outside. He opened the envelope to find a single piece of paper, writing scrawled on either side. Elliot smirked. He already knew who it was. He read as such. Yo, Elliot, it's Ollie. Sucks that you have to stay at that camp for the summer. It's been pretty sucky back here since you've been gone, but I gotta tell you something. It might just be nothing, or it could just turn out to be a big fucking deal. So last night, I got really bored and couldn't sleep, so... You remember when we used to search the deep web on your dad's old computer? Yeah, I did that, but on my computer. I couldn't quite remember how to get in at first, but eventually it came back to me. After a bit of searching once I was on the hidden wiki, I found this creepy-ass website. Soon after, I learned it was full of tutorials on how to summon demons and monsters, and all types of creepy shit like that. It was kinda getting too cliche for me though, so I was about to click off, until I saw one which sounded interesting. The Raggedy Man ritual. I clicked on it and read the description. It said something about a game for depraved souls, and some other weird stuff I can't remember. It was creepy though. At the bottom of the page it gave me a list. 2 mirrors, salt, darkness, and something to prop the mirrors up. It then went on to explain how to summon the Raggedy Man to begin the game. I followed what it said. Propping the 2 mirrors, I found up facing each other, and sprinkling salt in a circle around them. After it was done, I turned off the lights and sat in between the mirrors and read a poem from the website. I had to memorize it, cause I couldn't leave the computer on. It said I needed pitch darkness. As I'm writing this, I realize I'm sounding pretty crazy, but you get it. Anyway, I closed my eyes and recited the poem. Raggedy Man, won't you come out and play? Raggedy Man, or else you cannot stay. Raggedy Man, as quiet as a mouse. Raggedy Man, awaken from your dark house. After saying it, I just sat there for a moment. Nothing really happened, so I checked the website again. I probably should have read the whole thing before I did the ritual. It said that once completed, you are trapped in a game with the Raggedy Man. He will appear in anywhere, in any form to stalk you. He can take the shape of someone you know or a complete stranger. For whoever performs the ritual, the objective is to not let the Raggedy Man touch you, but he cannot use force to do so. The website? This is because the Raggedy Man prefers to work more discreetly, whatever the hell that means. It didn't go much into detail about what happens if you lose the game, but I assume you just die or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I'll keep posted if anything creepy happens. Thought you might be interested. From, Ollie. Elliot had been friends with Ollie since their first year of school. This certainly wasn't the strangest thing he's done. Elliot chuckled as he finished the letter. This kid. He giggled under his breath as he placed it down beside him. The next few days were just as agonizing as the first 4, if not more so. Elliot was usually fond of the outdoors, but something in that hollow wood unsettled him. He woke up once more on the 9th day of his summer camp extravaganza to the sound of a familiar voice. Elliot Peters? The same large camp counselor said. Elliot rubbed his crusty eyes. Yep, he called out. The man stomped over and dropped a letter on his lap. Thanks. Elliot sighed as the man wandered out of the cabin door. Assuming the letter was just an update from Ollie, Elliot ripped open the envelope and began to read. Yo, Elliot, it's me again. Something's not right, man. Some real scary stuff has been happening. The ritual, it worked. No joke, I'm freaking out right now. Let me explain. I woke up the other day after I sent you that letter and heard my mom calling me from downstairs, so I get halfway down the stairs to see what she wants. Then I remembered. She's been on a business trip to Budapest for the past 5 days. She told me she wouldn't be back for a week. I ran back upstairs. Obviously scared out of my mind, I pushed my back against my bedroom door, so whoever was in my house couldn't get to me. I thought of what it said on the website. The Raggedy Man can take any form. So I just stand there for like half an hour, just trying to figure out if I was dreaming or not. I tell you, man, longest 30 minutes of my life. Anyway, after a while I finally managed to calm myself down, just figuring I must have imagined it. So I opened the door and crept downstairs to make sure there was no one there. There wasn't. I called my dad to tell him to come home straight away. I think he could tell I was shaken by my voice because he was at the house not 10 minutes later. That helped a lot. The rest of the day went without incident, but that unsettled me even more, in a way. I told my dad what happened, and he agreed that I must have just imagined it. I didn't tell him about the ritual, though. If he found out I'd been on the deep web again, he would have kicked my ass. The day passed and I got into bed, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fall asleep. It must have been 3 in the morning when, as soon as I was about to finally drift off, I heard a knock at my door. I lay there for a few moments, not saying a word. Then I heard a second set of knocks, but much louder that time. Finally, I managed to squeeze out a weak, "Who's there?" There was a pause before I heard my dad's voice on the other side. "I want to talk about what happened earlier. Can you open the door, please?" Something about his tone was just, I don't know the word, uncanny. I knew that something was wrong. "No, Dad, I'm trying to get some sleep." After I said that, there was just silence. It felt like ages before I heard the sound of footsteps slowly walking back down the hallway. I was shaken to my core. That night, I stayed up until my eyelids just fell. I must have passed out because the next morning I woke up, aching on my bedroom floor. But what I dreamt of, I shudder to remember. All I can recall was that I found myself in a dirty, decrepit hallway with no end in sight. The walls were a disgusting, creamy shade of yellow, with moss crawling up them. The hallway was dimly lit by a row of rusted chandeliers, the wax of their candles dripping into the metal. I walked for what felt like miles. I just kept going. Then I heard it. The sound of heavy boots slamming on the floor echoed out from behind me. I turned to see a tall figure stood motionless in the hallway, no more than 10 feet away from me. The Raggedy Man. He was large, with brown, saggy trousers, and a similarly colored jacket covered in filth. His face was unkempt, and just like the rest of him, was covered in brown and black dirt. Thick dreadlocks draped over his shoulders, crawling with lice and other insects. His piercing eyes a similar, sickening yellow to the walls. His mouth unmoving, he spoke to me. As if he were in my head, He growled a phrase which has haunted me since. "You're going to have to try harder than that." With that, I woke up. Just as I said, on the floor and dripping with sweat. "Elliot, I'm not okay." I asked my dad and he said he never came to my door. "But don't worry, I'm working on a way to end the game. I'll keep you posted. Ollie." Elliot put the letter down. He shook his head in confusion. "He must be fucking with me," he muttered. Slightly disgruntled by his friend's tasteless joke, Elliot crawled out of his stiff bed with a groan. That place made him feel 30 years older. Noticing the rest of the kids in the cabin getting ready, he threw on his outdoor clothes and trudged outside behind the rest of the troop. The subsequent day passed slowly. First, a hiking trip, then a series of monotonous activities in the woods, and finally, an excruciating song time around the campfire, until the sky was black and blue and filled with stars. Elliot got to sleep very quickly that night. He woke up the next morning to the sound of his name being called once again. "Elliot Peters," the same man called, again stood centered between the rows of beds. Elliot sat up, somewhat surprised. He wasn't expecting an update this soon. How had the letter even gotten there so soon? He thought. Before the man could call again, Elliot waved his hand in the air. "Over here." The man walked over to him, handing him the third letter. Elliot thanked him once more as he left. For a moment, he contemplated not reading it, not willing to entertain it, but he caved in. Too curious to ignore it, he tore off the envelope and read, "Elliot, I have some good news. This will be the last letter I will send you regarding this whole Raggedy Man situation. I ended the game. However, I may not have been completely truthful with you in the past 2 letters. Let me explain. The night of the ritual, when I told you that I couldn't quite remember what the article said, well, I did remember. In fact, I've read it many times now. I just wasn't sure if you were ready to hear it. To be as brief as possible, it said the game cannot be ended, only passed on to new players, through the use of a separate ritual, the details of which I'll spare you. You can transfer the curse of the Raggedy Man to someone else. According to the site, there are many ways of passing on the game, but the least complicated one, and the one I've used, involves tricking someone else into talking to the Raggedy Man 3 times. I'm sure if you're reading this letter, then you probably have. I know how you are. Always thanking people. Always so polite. Depending on the form he has taken, he may have just left, but he'll be back. I'm sorry, Elliot. Your friend, Ollie." Trashman, Trashman, that's who he is. Trashman, Trashman, better be careful. Trashman, Trashman, for if you litter, Trashman, Trashman, trash is what you'll be. What are you singing? My attention from my brand new video game was given to my friend, Darian, who had begun to sing that strange song. Darian shrugged his shoulders. To be honest, I'm not sure. I overheard some guys singing it and for some reason it got stuck in my head. Don't you hate that? Yeah, that does suck. But who the hell is the Trashman? Are they talking about the people who come collect the trash every Monday? Darian shrugged again. Like I said, I don't know. With that, I returned to my new game, leaving Darian to his strange but soothing tune of a mysterious trash man. The next day after my shift from work, I decided to meet Darian at a local diner. We usually meet each other on Friday nights after work to sit back and chat while drinking. As I sat there waiting for Darian to show up like his usual 5 minutes later self, I indulged myself into random messages and posts on social media. Then, my attention was taken from that when I heard Darian entering the diner singing that strange but soothing tune. Trashman, Trashman, that's who he is. Trashman, Trashman. You're still singing that? I asked. Yeah, man, it's just so catchy. Darian sat down across from me. He reached for a menu, quickly scrolling through. Alright, what should I get today? Why bother? You always pick the same, I said. Darian grinned. Yeah. He mutters a song under his breath as he looked through the menu. Trashman, Trashman. Dude, come on. I know it's catchy, but how can you still be singing it? Darian didn't look up. He shrugged his shoulders. Can't help. I let out an annoyed sigh. I've known Darian for many years, and once he gets something stuck in his head, can't let it go. Still, who was this Trashman he keeps singing about? Tried searching on my phone as we waited for our server, but found nothing. Just who or what is the Trashman? Darian continued to sing the song at a low tone, not wanting to bother the other patrons, when suddenly an old man who could barely walk without his cane stumbled over to us like a three-legged terrier. "Excuse me, son, where did you happen to hear that song?" he asked. Darian stopped his singing to look up at the man. He seemed confused as to why this old man had approached him. He said. "I overheard some guys singing it one day." "Why?" "That is a tune I haven't heard in years. I'm surprised there are still those who sing of it. Though I shouldn't be surprised, for that song is a warning." "Wait, a warning?" I asked. Darian raised an eyebrow. "What, that if you litter, you'll get in trouble? I think everyone knows that. It's like a $500 bill. Fine, right?" The old man waved a brittle hand in the air. "No, boy, this isn't a fine. You wish it were. No, the trash man comes and collects those who dirty the street." "Collects? So he is a trash man?" Darian shook his head. "No, he collects the ones that litter, man. He's like a cop." The old man made his place at our table. He shoved Darian further into the wall, while he eyes the two of us. "You two need to be careful," he said. "That trash man is not someone you can take lightly, for once you litter, he'll collect you." The old man lifted his head, his eyes pointing at the ceiling. Yeah. It looked as if he could see something that no one else could. Just like he did to Jim. "Who's Jim?" The old man brought down his eyes. Jim was someone who didn't listen to the warnings. You see, one night, after getting off work, Jim grabbed himself a nice cool beer, like most would after a hard day of work. Yet, he didn't just throw the can away into a trash can. No, Jim did like most would do and threw it on the ground. As he walked down drunkenly, his words slurring as he spoke to the air, he didn't hear the taps coming forth from the darkness. Taps? "So, the trash man is a tap dancer? Man has qualifications," Darian said jokingly. It wasn't his feet making the tapping, it was his fingers. The old man held up his hands, wiggling his fingers. You see, the trash man's face is covered completely by a black plastic trash bag. The only thing that's not covered is his nose. They say that the trash man litters himself, but was cursed to collect trash forever. Yet for his punishment, his smell was enhanced, so it is the only part of his face that isn't covered. "And that has to do with his fingers?" Darian asked. "I'm getting to it." The old man rubbed his bushy chin. "You see, though he can smell, he can't see, so he reaches out with his fingers searching and picking up any trash he can, but his fingers had touched the ground so much that they have been worn down to the bone, so his bony tips make tapping sounds as they search the ground." "They were rubbed down to the bone?" I stared at my fingers. The time I burnt my finger while grabbing a pot on the stove without a mitten brought back painful memories. "That's insane." The old man nodded. Now back to the story. Jim didn't hear the trash man's bony fingers tapping against the ground. Then, it is said when the trash man finds the toss, he can scream out a muffled yell. Jim didn't have a second to react. He was grabbed by the trash man and tossed into the large trash can that he carries on his back. "Damn, guess you can say the trash man took out the trash," Darian said. The old man nodded. Yes, and that trash was never seen again, for whatever the trash man puts in the trash can on his back is never seen or heard from again. "The trash can must be huge if it can fit a normal person," I said. The old man shook his head. "It is bigger than a standard one, but not too much bigger. At times, I've heard he had to shove a person right into it, breaking every bone in their body." Darian shivered. Though he was a big horror fan, he had never been fond of seeing people's bones break, or even when bones are shown sticking out. It had come from a childhood memory of his when he fell out of a tree, and his left bone snapped. Ever since then, Darian never liked seeing or hearing about bones breaking. He covered his ears as the old man went on. Chill. The old man gave a queer look. Sorry, just broken bones. He shivered. They freak me out. A wearily smile formed over Darian. The old man leads towards him, giving him a vile smile in response. The old man's crooked teeth were revealed during this exchange. Then don't go littering, my boy. The man checked the time on his wristwatch. Well, time to take my leave. Thanks for listening to an old coot story, boys. With that, he took his leave, but not without humming that tune of the Trashman. Darian and I sat there going over the crazy story the old man had told us. To believe that the song Darian had been singing this whole time had been connected to a story of a missing person. I remember on our way home, I looked up articles for any missing people, but could not truly find anything connected. Darian turned to me, hands in his pockets. Hey, I was going to ask you a question. I glanced up from my phone. Shocked, I stuffed my phone into my pocket. Sorry, man, I couldn't stop thinking about the story. What, were you looking it up? I nodded. Yeah, but I can't find anything. I should ask that old man. Jimmy, last name. I let out a sigh. Yeah, I can't stop thinking about it either. Darian scratched the back of his head. But I guess that's one of those stories just to scare people. I mean, if they actually did happen, I'm sure people would talk about it. Darian then began to ponder something. I guess that's why some people know that song. Unless it's just catchy. I walked past Darian letting out a small chuckle and a smile. Yeah, guess you're right. Suddenly a group of 5 young teenagers of different heights came toward us. I stepped over, putting myself in front of Darian, letting the teens walk past. One of the teens held a fast food cup in his hand. His lips pressed on the straw. He took a couple of sips before removing his lips to examine his cup. He shook it, then in a haste, tossed it onto the ground. I couldn't believe it. How could people just litter like that? I mean, I know there isn't a trash can around, but don't just throw it on the ground. Darian held out a hand toward the group. Hey kid, you shouldn't litter, man. It's not good for the environment. Besides, haven't you heard of the Trashman? The group stopped to stare at us. Couldn't believe what Darian said. The group who threw the cup on the floor walked over to it and stomped on it, his fat foot pressing it deeper into the ground. The group laughed before walking off. Darian shook his head. Teenagers, man. Hey, we were like that too, I said, though I never did throw trash on the ground. Darian shrugged. Yeah. He took a step past me and started a hum which soon became accompanied by words. Trashman, Trashman. I turned to watch the group of teenagers around the corner as Darian sung that song. I felt a chill that day, but thinking it to be from the breeze at the time, I never expected what I would see on the news the next day. The teen that had tossed the cup on the ground had been killed. Or at least that's what his friends stated that day. Officials consider him to be missing and are conducting a search. The other teens described what had happened that night. They gathered for some smokes at a park only to see a tall, slender man coming toward them. He was draped in black, torn, dingy material that looked like a trash bag. He was hunched over, searching over the ground as a horrible tap sound echoed from his fingers. Dirty chains and ropes were wrapped over his entire body that seemed to hold a trash can on his back. The teens thought it was some homeless man and tried to scare him away. The missing teen threw another cup at him to scare him away, yet that caused the man to stop only to sniff the air. In a quickness, they couldn't believe the strange man reached at the boy. The other teens could see how horrifying his face and hands were. The missing teen screamed out, only for the strange man to stuff him into his trash can. With his screams and the gut-wrenching sound of bones cracking, the other teens ran off. With that, the news anchor went on to explain that the police were still going to search, hoping to find the missing teen. I couldn't believe what I heard. I mean, it couldn't be real, could it? It's just not possible. A knock came from my door. Hey Justin, it's me. Darian's voice echoed from the other side. I stood at the door, then back at my TV. The catchy but strange song about the creepy trash man came into my mind. Trashman, Trashman, that's who he is. Trashman, Trashman, you better be careful. Trashman, Trashman, for if you litter, Trashman, Trashman, trash is what you'll be. The woods around my town are haunted by an unspeakable evil, a monster that lurks in the darkest hollows of the dead oaks. Growing up, I always heard stories, savage tales of lost children, turning up weeks later in varying states of decaying pieces. I never truly believed them. I mean, why would you? After all, spooky stories are just that, stories. That was, till I was 17. The local news erupted with a story. A boy of 10 named Tommy had wandered into the woods one day, maybe in search of slow worms and other critters. He had gone around 1 p.m. and not returned for his curfew of 6 p.m. He was searched for by many of the townsfolks, but to no avail. His body was never found. Well, was never found whole. 3 weeks after the disappearance, parts of his body were recovered from the part of the woods known as the Grove, a thickly grown part of the woods where sunlight never reached. The grove was avoided by all the townsfolk. I had once walked near and heard such strange noises that I ran away fast. Many of the locals didn't believe in the monster in the woods, but I couldn't help but think there was some truth in it. The running theory was the boy had been taken by a very human killer. My morbid curiosity led me to read up on the subject in the local news archive. The cases began in 1990. 30 years had gone by, and in that time, there had been 15 cases. That was 15 children of the local area who had gone missing in the woods and turned up in pieces weeks later. That very fact gave me a chilling feeling. My heart broke when I'd seen the many pictures of them. The ages ranged from 5 to 12. They all went missing in the same sort of area. After so many hours, my mind and heart could not take any more of the research. It was horrifying to think of a small child so lost and afraid in the woods, lured to its demise. A few months had passed and I occasionally dipped back into the research. It never truly went anywhere. I had hit a wall. Evidence of any kind of human killer was thin on the ground. No one had ever been suspected of the crimes, ever. In fact, no real evidence had ever come to light. It was truly a mystery. I brought up maps on my laptop, zoomed into my town, and then into the woods. I found the grove on the aerial view. The dense tree line stood out from the rest immensely. The dark, foreboding patch of green and black gave me the creeps, as if its evil oozed from every pixel on my screen. I sat thinking for a while, staring at the screen transfixed by the dark patches. I had to visit this area. That in and of itself was a bad idea. Whatever lay within the confines of the grove's tangled roots, be it man or monster, surely would take me too. The next day, I packed a torch, survival kit, and knife, and my phone with a power bank. It was spring and the weather was fair, so I decided to wear a hoodie and jeans. I grabbed my stuff and left my house, and headed towards the woods. It took me about 30 minutes to get to the tree line. The first trees were the youngest saplings. As I traveled deeper, the trees got older and thicker. I followed one of the many trails. They all entwined somewhere along the line, until I arrived on the outskirts of the grove. I knew I had arrived by the difference in the light. Everything was darker here. The birds didn't come to this part of the woods. The sunlight stayed away too. I felt the hairs on my neck stand on end. An eerie feeling washed over me. I was being watched. I found a relatively clear part of the thick bush and trees and broke through. The grove was dark. The smell of rot hung in the air. The total area was no more than the size of half a football field. Many trees dotted around. Most were big, beastly specimens with a canopy that engulfed the sky, blocking the light. I looked around myself. If I had seen a picture of my viewpoint, I'd believe it to be of any wood in the country. Yet in person, the malevolent atmosphere was oppressive. The trees in the grove had all black trunks. The scattered boulders were thickly covered in mosses of greens and browns. I began to walk around, using the torch to see in the dim light. There was nothing disturbing in the area. As I walked past a particularly large tree, I spotted something blue in the decaying leaves and dirt of the ground. I picked it up. A scrap of fabric, most likely clothing. An image flashed back to me of the children. He had been wearing a blue jersey in the picture. My stomach dropped. Somehow, the situation had just become terribly real to me now. I walked further past a large boulder. Beyond the boulder, hidden by bushes of holly, I noticed a dark mouth to a cave. My nerves had all but left me by now. The deathly silence of the grove somehow managed to crush my spirit. It was as if the trees themselves sapped my heart of all the goodness to be had in the world, growing new branches on the desolation of man. I stood and looked at the mouth of the cave, like a hungry monster beckoning me further to be its latest meal. A cool breeze was coming from the cave, yet no trees or leaves moved in its exhale. I took my first step towards the opening. Fear was building the closer I got. When I stood a meter away, I could make out a few steps into the gloom. The rest was a scarlet sheet of unknown darkness. The cold breeze had now shifted its direction, inhaling me into its mouth. The unnatural force of the wind pushing my back made me stumble forward towards the opening. As I entered the cave, darkness swallowed my world. I was greeted by a disgusting smell, ammonia and sulfur. I recognized it from the chemical works in town. I started to root in my bag until I found my torch. My hand rested on the handle of the Bowie knife I had brought with me. It was probably a good idea to keep it in my hand ready. Around me was dirt and rocks. It looked as if someone had tunneled into the ground through the rocks and dirt to create a cave. I turned the light on. My Mieger circle of light illuminated small sections of the walls and floor. I was on edge, waiting for whatever lurked in the dark to jump out at me and take me from the mortal world into the next planes of suffering. But nothing did. Instead, the stench of the cave grew more horrific as I descended into the unknown. The chemical smells had infused with the unmistakable stench of death. As I reached the end of the tunnel, a sudden noise penetrated the silent darkness. Movement ahead of me. I wasn't alone. I slowly moved the lights around in front of me, trying to find the source of the noise. My hand shook slightly, making the beam of light shake. Shadows danced around the visible portion of the cave. From what I could see, the tunnel opened up into a small cavern. I took a step forward. My foot crushed something on the floor with a sickening, snapping noise. I shone the light down at my feet in a panic. Under my foot, snapped clean in two, was a bone. A small thigh bone to be exact. I shit myself. Terror had been steadily since I entered the cave, but now my panic levels were maxed out. I gave a cry of horror at the sight of the small bone. It was definitely from one of the children who had gone missing. Lost in the pure terror and grief of the situation, I was brought back to reality as I heard a noise behind me. A scuttling noise, like you would expect from a vermin in a back alley dumpster. Only the noise was being made by something much larger. I wheeled around, and brought both hands up in instinct. The knife poised in my hand, aimed into the darkness. I used the torch to scan the area. Nothing. I heard the scuttle again, behind me deeper into the cavern. I spun around, using the torch to see. My heart was beating fast and hard in my chest. I was convinced at any point it would give out, and I would collapse in the dark to the putrid cave and never be found. Shaking the thoughts from my head, I stepped forward, again crunching a bone on the floor. The scuttle came closer to me. I moved the torch to the point of the noise. What I saw has never left me. 4 white-skinned, spidery limbs, attached in impossible ways to a torso that looked faintly human. Sifting atop the monstrosity was a head. It was completely bald with a slit for a mouth, and 2 large eyes the color of snow. I gave a shriek of terror, began to slash in vain at the air in front of me with the knife. The thing looked at me and opened its mouth to an unimaginable size. It let out an unworldly screeching noise. The sound made my eardrums hurt. My head shook with the reverberations, as did the cave. Trying to keep my light steady on the monster, I lunged towards it with the knife outstretched. I felt the knife hit something fleshy and heavy. In a frenzy, I began to hack and slash. The monster shrieked and thrashed before me as each of my attacks found their home in its devilish body. I don't know how I managed to fight the denizen. I had been overcome with panic and fear one moment, and the next, a unending fury that led me to attack until my foe fell in a heap on the floor. I dropped to my knees, exhausted. With the light, I examined the beast in front of me. The white skin stretched over the many bones of its skeleton. The blank face that displayed malice now looked strangely peaceful. I was shaking hard, and the words, "Get out," screamed in every part of my body. My feet took control of the situation. I stood up and made for the entrance of the tunnel. As I got to the opening in the wall, I heard a noise that made me scream in panic and fear. The scuttling. I turned the light back around to see the heaped form of the beast moving. Sickening, crunching noises came from the corpse. It wasn't dead. It began to get back on all fours. My legs carried me faster than ever before in my life. I ran through the darkness towards the pale patch of light coming from the cave's mouth. Soon, I had cleared the opening. Back into the grove, I felt free. I didn't stop running until I had cleared the woods and was back on my street. I looked around me. So many people were milling around their houses in a state of blissful ignorance at the true horror that lay within the woods. That night, I didn't sleep. The images of the beast haunted my closed eyes. I had been sure it was dead, yet, as I left it, stood back up. I know if I had never run, I would have been part of the statistic of unexplained deaths in the forest. Part of me felt lucky, but the majority felt unlucky. I had seen death and escaped, but the many children hadn't been so lucky. I felt sick, thinking about the disgusting monster devouring the small legs and arms of a child, cleaning the flesh from the bone, and spitting out the gristle. I write this now in an attempt to warn others, locals and tourists. The woods that surround Allahurst are evil. They hold many forgotten evils, many twisted truths. If you go walking in the woods, you may never return. At best, only a small part of you will get lost, like myself. But your body will be whole, unlike so many others. So be warned, dear reader. The woods hold the truest horrors of our earth, and they're hungry. I used to live right next to a park where I would take my dog for walks. The park was comprised of 2 walking paths. I was taking my dog for a long stroll through the park one night at about 10 o'clock, when I decided to stop for a moment at one of the seating areas. As I sat down on the bench, I noticed an unusual stillness over the park. Normally, there would be people out in the parks this hour, maybe the occasional jogger, bicyclist, or someone like myself out walking their dog. But tonight, there wasn't a soul in sight. Where I was sitting, there were approximately 10 picnic tables. The structure covering this area was about 9 feet in height, and was constructed of 5 panels arranged in a zigzag pattern, like a row of pitched roofs edge to edge. As I sat taking in the view of the park, I started to hear an odd sound from the roof above me. My dog, also hearing the sound, directed his attention behind us, where the noise seemed to be coming from. It was an odd shuffling sound against the metal panels of the structure. Not sure what to expect or what to do. I stood up and held still for a few moments, listening to the movement above. Once the sound moved to the edge of the structure, it came to a sudden stop, and everything fell quiet once again. Just as I was about to exit the area, via the opposite direction, I heard a high-pitched screech. As I looked up, I saw the face of an old, decrepit man peering over the side of the structure. My dog barked and lunged towards the man, where he stayed motionless with a gigantic smile plastered across his face. Pulling my dog away, I ran faster than I have ever before, or since, out of that park. When I returned home, I immediately called the local police to inform them of a potentially dangerous homeless man in the park. The result of their search, I was sadly never made aware of, due to the police never getting back to me. To this day, I've never forgotten the suffocating panic and fear that gripped my body in that moment, nor shall I ever be able to forget the inhumanly large smile of that man, which is now forever burned into my memory. The names and places have been changed to protect my privacy. I'm a 19-year-old girl. I live in the northeast of the USA, and last year, my ex and cyberstalker was sentenced to 5 years in prison. I'm getting ahead of myself though. The story starts in late 2014. I was 14, almost 15. I was laying in my best friend Millie's bed while she showed me an app she had found. It reminded me of Facebook in a way. However, instead of adding people you already know, you add people you don't know to make friends, like the newer app Yubo. I noticed that all the people in her feed lived in our area, and I had never met some of the people. It didn't take much convincing for her to get me to download it. So that day, we laid in her bed giggling about boys in her bed. Eventually, I came across this very attractive blonde, 17-year-old boy. He had the perfect emo hair for 14-year-old me, and he had sent me a friend request. I accepted, and showed Molly his pictures. She got excited for me, and I can still hear her saying, "Get it." So, we started talking, and he was very sweet. He seemed almost perfect, except he lived over 1,000 miles away. I told Molly in disappointment, and questioned how he got into my recommended, as I had set the distance to a minimum of 30 miles. Her face soured, and she shrugged it off. He apologized for not telling me sooner, and wasting my time. I responded by telling him, "I'm on here to meet people, it's okay. We can still be friends if you'd like." So, we continued speaking to each other. Eventually, we exchanged kicks, and decided to start talking on there. Soon after that, my parents picked me up, and I went home not paying attention to my phone for about half an hour, as my little brother wanted to play when I got home. After a couple rounds of hide and seek, I picked up my phone, and noticed I had multiple kick messages from who we will call Nick, asking where I had gone. I know what you're thinking, red flag, but to me, this was normal. All my friends did this when I wasn't texting back. For weeks we talked every day until he asked me for my Skype. I didn't have a Skype, so I downloaded it on my laptop and made an account, then had him add me. He accidentally sent me a link to a random web page, then he Skyped me that night. That was the first time I saw his face. He was the person he claimed to be. I asked him about the link, but he just said he meant to send it to another friend and apologized, so I thought nothing of it. We laughed and talked for hours, until I asked him when his birthday was. He started crying. I mean, bawling his eyes out, ugly crying. I was so confused. I just asked about his birthday. I kept asking what was wrong. He looked up and said, "I lied to you." My heart sank in that moment, but I still had no idea what he was talking about. I'm not 17. I'm 19. I was speechless. There was nothing I could say. I put the wrong year in on accident and forgot about it. I remembered a little bit ago, but I didn't think it would go this far. I didn't think I would fall in love with you. My head dropped. I had just turned 15. I'm old enough. He loves me. I looked back up at the monitor and said in the most stern voice I could conjure up, "I'm not going to say that's okay. You should have told me sooner. Why wouldn't you have just said something? It's just 2 years. I mean, I love you too." From then on, I dated him for almost 3 years. Throughout those years, he would send me gifts to my house, love letters, anything I wanted. We talked all day, every day. At first, it was sweet, but it started to get frustrating. It didn't matter if I was at school or with my friends. I had to text him back immediately, or he would freak out and question my loyalty to him. It got to the point where he would make fake profiles to see if I would cheat on him. I tried to take these opportunities to break up with him, but I was so naive. I believed I had to save him. The first occasion he Skyped me, he wouldn't show me the bottle, but he took these pill capsules, opened them up, dumped them in water, and drank it. I know now that it was nothing toxic. The next time he used liquid latex and fake blood to send me a picture of him, slitting his wrists. He sent a picture with a needle in his arm, then a picture with a fake gun painted black to his head. And I eventually broke down and went to my guidance counselor in school. She got the police involved, who then got his county involved. Once they searched his computer, they found not only many pictures and videos of me that were taken of me changing without my consent, as that link I had mentioned earlier turned on my camera, but he had other girls he had done this to, and he had thousands of downloaded content. Someone who used to talk to him recently contacted me and warned me that he was still out on bail. He made terrifying claims. The friend said, "You were the only one who stayed as long as you did, and he's obsessed with you. He told me when he gets out, he's gonna come for you and spray paint heartograms on your house just to mess with you. Don't forget, he does know where you live," he said. "She's the first and the last I'll never forget. He's never gonna leave you alone. I know. I was very naive. I'm about to delete all my social media. I'm going to make my parents aware of what was said to me closer to the time he is to be released, as they are aware of the incident, but not in detail. I don't know how to protect myself. He has nothing to think about me until 2024. Then, he's free to come see me. That is, if he doesn't get out early on parole. This situation took place about 5 months ago. I'm an 18-year-old, 5'3" female, about 120 pounds. And at the time I was living with my boyfriend and roommates. On this particular night, I had the apartment all to myself, as I had the night off work, and my roommate was staying at her boyfriend's place. Now, my boyfriend and I were running low on weed because the plugs in this town are super awful at their job, so he had given me a phone number to a guy he wanted to buy from. Just for the record, I felt completely comfortable doing this, as I do it all the time. I would like to add here that this particular day, I hadn't smoked much at all. Not to mention smoking weed has never made me hallucinate once in my life. So, with that being said, I'll continue. It was around 11 or 12 when I hit up the dude. Soon after, he replied something along the lines of, "About to head your way." I told him I'd meet him by the mailboxes, by the leasing office, because no one actually gets into the complex without a key card or passcode, or at least no vehicle, as you can still get in by walking through an unlocked side gate. So, I made my way from my unit to the mailboxes to wait for him. I was scrolling through Reddit as I waited, when all of a sudden, I heard the squeakiest vehicle drive in. I looked up to see an old brown Chevy truck. At first, I assumed he was just going to pull through the gate, and that would be that. But instead, almost as soon as the person saw me standing there, they turned off their headlights and then pulled up to the closest possible parking spot to me. Which at first, I thought that this was the guy I was supposed to meet, but just kept looking down at my phone because I was unsure and hadn't received any text from the guy. I felt extremely uncomfortable by this random ass truck just sitting there with its headlights off right in front of me. But I just ignored the person until I noticed the window closest to me was now rolled all the way down. I look up for a split second to see a homeless man looking middle-aged with yellow instead of whites in his eyes. We make eye contact, and I immediately force my eyes back to my phone screen. Just looking at him made me feel a sinking sensation in my belly. I decided I was going to call my friend Ashley. I just wanted to make sure the dude didn't try to interact with me or anything. As I hold the phone up to my face, I look back at the man still right in front of me staring at me, but now I notice his lips are moving. He was talking, or more like murmuring to himself. At this point, I decided I was done waiting for this guy, so I'm gonna walk back home. Still on the phone with Ashley, making half-assed conversation, like, "How's your mother?" and "OMG, that's so crazy." I start walking away from the mailboxes as I unlatch and walk through the tall metal gate. I make it about 5 feet from the gate before I hear a car door slam shut. I look back to see. Yep, you guessed it. The man walking up to the gates I had just passed through seconds before. Keep in mind, you're not allowed to park at the front office parking, unless you're meeting with the landlord or checking your mail. So why would he be leaving his vehicle there at 12 a.m. to come in through the side entrance gate? As this is happening, I'm telling Ashley everything that's going on. I tell her, I'm scared. That this dude is definitely following me. My heart is racing. I don't have time to say anything else before I notice just how much space he had filled since I last looked back at him. I decided that I would walk off the sidewalk and just cut through the parking area, making a straight line to my apartment. Which, mind you, it's kind of odd to walk on the sidewalk, but I knew if he followed my trail off the sidewalk, I needed to run. So when I noticed him stepping off the sidewalk almost exactly when I did, which mind you at this point he had followed me down the right entrance path past the pool and the laundromat, so in my mind, I was more than certain that this man was trying to follow me. I spoke softly into the phone. I'm going to run for it. More saying it to mentally prepare myself. So with that, I dart away from the dune, crossing through the grassy areas and passing one of the dumpsters until my unit is in eyesight. I feel as if I've put enough distance between me and the man. I look back to see the man with both arms up, as if to say, "Where are you going?" He looked exhausted with his chest moving up and down with every breath. I continued to run until I make it inside my apartment, locked every single lock on the front door. I run upstairs and lock myself with my 3 small dogs in my room. I immediately hang up on Ashley to call my boyfriend to tell him what just happened. I remember pausing and just thinking to myself, wow, did that really just happen? He ended up texting the plug telling him some freak just chased me all the way home. As I was on the phone with my boyfriend, I started to hear something. At first I thought I was just tripping, but then I hear it once more, knocking on my front door. But my dogs didn't even start barking before the knocking on my front door stopped. The feeling of relief of hearing it stop is immediately replaced by fear stinging through my body, as I remember that I have a large glass sliding door downstairs in my dining room, and I couldn't remember if it was locked or unlocked. My roommate had a habit of leaving it unlocked when she let her dog out. Now I would like to say I went down there and rushed to lock it, but instead I just turned off my lights in my bedroom and locked my bedroom door. I know, not the brightest idea, but I was just so scared. So I just turned my bedroom light off and hid in there for a good while. Nothing else ever happened that night. I ended up checking out all my windows for the man, and nothing. Judge me if you must, but I eventually did go back out there to the mailboxes to meet the weed man later that night. But I took my car this time, along with my roommate's biggest kitchen knife. Weeks go by without incident. Weeks go by, me never seeing this man or his truck ever again. And trust me, I looked for it often in the complex. So just stay safe out there, because apparently there are freaks literally just waiting to chase you home in the middle of the night.